Atlanta, Georgia, October 15, 2025, 7:30 p.m. A sudden fist from Officer James Carter slammed into Caleb Turner's jaw, snapping his head back as blood trickled from his split lip. The cold bite of handcuffs tightened around his wrists, and the 17-year-old was shoved into the back of a patrol car under the flickering glow of a Buckhead streetlight. Caleb closed his eyes, breathing deeply, knowing his father. Federal Judge Daniel Turner would soon notice his absence from their dinner table. Officers Carter and Hayes had just made the gravest mistake of their careers. They'd assaulted the son of one of Georgia's most powerful men. But this story isn't just about Caleb, it's about those without a judge for a father, those whose cries for justice go unheard. Caleb Turner's sneakers pounded the pavement in a steady rhythm, matching the beat of the Drake track pulsing through his earbuds. The cool October evening wrapped around him as he jogged through Buckhead, Atlanta's upscale neighborhood of manicured lawns and stately homes. At 17, Caleb was a standout track athlete at North Atlanta High, his lean 6-foot frame cutting through the air with the grace of someone born to run. His GPA of 3.8 and dreams of a Stanford scholarship kept him focused. But tonight, his mind was on the practice he'd just left. Coach Hargrove had clocked his sprints at near-record times, hinting at a spot in the state championships. A faint smile tugged at Caleb's lips as he adjusted his earbuds. The music a shield against the world's noise. The streets of Buckhead were quiet, save for the occasional hum of a luxury car gliding past. Caleb had lived here for 5 years, ever since his father's appointment to the federal bench. The Turner's home, a modern Georgian-style house on Peachtree Road, was a testament to Daniel Turner's rise from a small-town lawyer to a judicial powerhouse. Yet, Caleb was no stranger to the curious glances from some neighbors when he ran through these streets, a young black man in a neighborhood where wealth often meant whiteness. His father's voice echoed in his mind from countless talks: keep your hands visible, move slowly, stay calm. Those lessons, drilled into him since he was 12, were a survival guide for a world that didn't always see him as the honor student and athlete he was. Caleb checked his smartwatch. 7:15 p.m. He'd promised his dad he'd be home by 8 o'clock for dinner, a ritual Daniel insisted on despite his demanding schedule. The judge valued punctuality almost as much as integrity, traits that had earned him respect and fear in Georgia's legal circles. Caleb picked up his pace, the cool air soothing the sweat on his brow. His small running backpack bounced lightly against his shoulders, holding only a water bottle, spare shoes, and a notebook for his AP Literature class. The streetlights cast long shadows, painting the sidewalks in alternating bands of light and dark. A flash of red and blue caught his eye, reflecting off a parked Tesla's window. Caleb glanced back, spotting a police cruiser trailing him, its pace deliberate, almost predatory. His stomach tightened, an instinctive reaction honed by years of his father's warnings. He lowered the volume on his earbuds but kept running, forcing himself to maintain an even stride. The cruiser drew closer, its engine a low growl. Caleb's heart quickened, but he kept his gaze forward, refusing to let fear take over. He considered texting his dad, but dismissed the idea. No need to worry him over what might be nothing. The cruiser pulled alongside him, and the passenger window slid down. Officer James Carter, a wiry man with a buzz cut and sunglasses perched on his head despite the dusk, leaned out. "Hey, kid," he called, his tone sharp. "Hold up a second." Caleb slowed to a stop, pulling his earbuds out and letting them dangle around his neck. "Good evening, officer," he said, his voice steady, hands resting loosely at his sides. "I'm just heading home from track practice." The driver's door opened, and Officer Michael Hayes stepped out, a broad-shouldered man with a ruddy complexion and a hand resting casually on his holster. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Hayes asked, his eyes narrowing as they scanned Caleb's sweat-soaked running gear. I live here, Caleb replied, keeping his tone respectful. My house is at 245 Peachtree Road, a few blocks away. Carter smirked, exchanging a glance with Hayes. You live in Buckhead, right? Got any ID to prove that? Caleb shook his head. I don't carry my wallet when I run, sir. I came straight from practice at North Atlanta High. You can follow me home if you want. My dad can confirm everything. Hayes stepped closer, his bulk looming. Your dad, huh? What's he do that he can afford a place around here? Clean. Houses the jab stung, but Caleb swallowed his anger. He works for the federal government, he said carefully, avoiding specifics. His father had cautioned that mentioning his position could escalate things with the wrong cop. Carter's smirk widened. Federal government. Sure, what's in the bag, kid? Without waiting for permission, Hayes snatched Caleb's backpack, unzipping it and dumping its contents onto the sidewalk. The water bottle rolled into the gutter, and his notebook landed in a puddle. Just running stuff, Caleb said, fighting the urge to grab his belongings. Please, I'm not doing anything wrong. Hayes kicked the notebook aside, his boot, leaving a muddy smear on the cover. No ID, no proof you belong here, and you're running around at night. Sounds like trouble to me. Across the street, 16-year-old Emma Lawson stood on her family's balcony, her phone already recording. She recognized Caleb from school. He was the quiet guy who always aced history quizzes and dominated the track meets. Her heart raced as she watched the officers close in on him, their postures aggressive. She tapped the record button, whispering to herself, "This isn't right." Her thumbs flew across the screen, uploading the video to Twitter with a caption. Cops harassing a kid in Buckhead. This is Caleb Turner. Share this. Back on the street, Carter's tone grew harder. We got a call about a suspicious person in the area. A black male, young, athletic build. Sounds like you. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. That's not me, sir. I gave you my address, 245 Peachtree Road. You can check it. Hayes laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the quiet street. Check it. You think we're your escorts? Turn around, hands behind your back. Caleb's pulse spiked, but he complied, slowly turning and placing his hands behind him. I'm not resisting, he said, his voice calm but firm. I just want to go home. Carter grabbed his wrists, snapping the handcuffs on with enough force to make Caleb wince. The metal dug into his skin, cold and unyielding. You're being detained for suspicious activity, Hayes said, his hands still on his holster. Keep talking, and we'll add resisting arrest. A small crowd had begun to gather dog walkers, a jogger pausing mid-stride, but no one intervened. Caleb caught the eye of an older woman clutching her poodle, her expression torn between concern and hesitation. Ma'am, he called out, his voice steady despite the growing panic. Please call Daniel Turner at the federal courthouse. Tell him Caleb's in trouble. Hayes spun him around, shoving him against the patrol car. Shut it, he growled, his face inches from Caleb's. Nobody's calling anybody. The shove sent a jolt of pain through Caleb's shoulder as it hit the car's door. He bit his lip, tasting blood where his teeth had caught the inside of his cheek. Carter leaned in, his sunglasses now tucked into his shirt. You're in a rich neighborhood, kid. People like you don't just wander around here without a reason. Where'd you come from? Caleb's patience frayed, but he clung to his father's advice. I told you, I live here. My dad is Daniel Turner. He's a federal judge. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, both officers froze. Then Hayes laughed, a mocking bark. A judge's kid? Yeah, and I'm the governor. You're full of it. Before Caleb could respond, Carter's fist shot out, connecting with his jaw. The impact sent stars bursting across his vision, and he stumbled, the handcuffs preventing him from catching himself. Blood dripped onto his shirt, warm and sticky. "That's for lying," Carter said, his voice low and dangerous. "Keep it up, and it'll get worse." Emma's hands shook as she kept filming, her phone capturing every second of the assault. She zoomed in, catching the glint of Carter's badge number 3742B, for tweeting the video again. It's time tagging local news outlets. The clip was already racking up retweets, spreading like wildfire across Atlanta's digital landscape. Hayes grabbed Caleb's arm, yanking him toward the open door of the patrol car. "Get in, smart guy. We're taking you downtown to sort this out." Caleb's legs felt unsteady, but he forced himself to move, sliding into the back seat. The door slammed shut, sealing him in behind a thick plastic partition. Through the window, he saw Emma still filming, her face pale but determined. A flicker of hope sparked in his chest. She was his witness, his lifeline. Inside the cruiser, the air was stale, smelling of sweat and disinfectant. Caleb leaned his head against the window, the cool glass soothing his throbbing jaw. His father's voice echoed again. "Stay alive. Get home. Then we fight." He focused on his breathing, slow and deliberate, as the car pulled away from the curb. The officers' conversation filtered through the partition, their voices casual, almost jovial. "Kid's got some nerve, claiming he's a judge's son," Hayes said, chuckling. "Bet he stole that fancy watch, too," Carter replied. "We'll teach him to respect authority." The ride to the station was a blur of pain and dread. Caleb's jaw ached, and his wrists burned where the cuffs bit into his skin. He thought of his mother, Olivia, a retired investigative journalist who'd always taught him to stand up for what was right. She'd be pacing the kitchen by now, her sharp eyes darting to the clock as 8 o'clock approached with no sign of him. His father would be calling his phone, growing more concerned with each unanswered ring. Caleb clung to that thought. Knowing Daniel Turner was not a man to be trifled with. The Atlanta Police Department's downtown precinct was a squat concrete building bathed in harsh fluorescent light. Hayes yanked Caleb out of the car, his grip bruising as he steered him through the entrance. The lobby buzzed with activity officers at desks, phones ringing, a handcuffed man shouting in a holding cell. Heads turned as Caleb was marched through, his bloodied face and cuffed hands drawing curious stares. He kept his eyes forward, refusing to let the humiliation sink in at the processing desk. A tired-looking sergeant named Rodriguez glanced up, his gaze lingering on Caleb's swelling jaw. "What's this one in for?" he asked, pen poised over a form. "Suspicious activity, trespassing, resisting arrest," Carter said smoothly, his tone practiced. "Caught him lurking in Buckhead, no ID, giving us lip." Caleb's voice cut through, steady, despite the pain. "That's not true. I live at 245 Peachtree Road. I was running home from track practice. They hit me when I was already cuffed." Rodriguez's eyebrows rose, but Carter clamped a hand on Caleb's shoulder, squeezing hard. "Keep your mouth shut, kid. You're not helping yourself." The sergeant's eyes flicked between Caleb and the officers, something unreadable in his expression. "Name?" he asked. "Caleb Turner," Caleb replied. "My father is Daniel Turner, a federal judge." "Call him, please. I'll confirm everything." Hayes snorted. "This kid's delusional, thinks he's somebody." Rodriguez hesitated, then jotted down the name. "No ID?" he asked. "He was running," Hayes said, his tone dismissive. "Claims his wallet's at home. Convenient, right?" Caleb's frustration boiled over, but he kept it in check. "I'm telling the truth. Just call my dad." Rodriguez nodded slowly, picking up the phone, but Carter leaned over the desk, lowering his voice. "Sarge, we've got this under control. Kids are just spinning stories. Let's process him and move on." Before Rodriguez could respond, the precinct's front doors swung open and a hush fell over the room. Daniel Turner strode in, his 6'3" frame commanding attention in a tailored navy suit. His eyes, usually warm when he looked at Caleb, were now twin storms of controlled fury. Behind him trailed his chief of staff, Linda Brooks, her tablet already open, taking notes. The sergeant snapped to attention, and even Carter and Hayes stiffened, their earlier confidence wavering. "Where's my son?" Daniel's voice was low, but carried the weight of a courtroom gavel. Rodriguez pointed toward Caleb, who stood flanked by the officers, his face a map of bruises and defiance. Daniel's gaze locked onto his son, and for a moment, raw pain flashed across his features before hardening into resolve. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping inches from Carter and Hayes. "Which one of you put your hands on my boy?" Carter swallowed, his bravado crumbling. "Sir, there was an incident. During the arrest." He resisted. Daniel cut him off, his voice slicing through the excuse. "My son is 17, unarmed, and was running home from school. You handcuffed him, beat him, and now you're lying to my face." He turned to Rodriguez. "Cuff him. Now." The sergeant moved quickly, unlocking the cuffs with a clatter. Caleb rubbed his wrists, the relief overshadowed by the throbbing in his jaw. Linda stepped forward, her voice crisp. "Judge Turner, I've already contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI. The body cam footage from these officers has been requested." Hayes's face paled, and Carter's hand twitched toward his badge, as if to shield it. Daniel didn't break eye contact with them. "You two are done. By morning, you'll be off the force, and by week's end, you'll face charges. Assault on a minor, false arrest, civil rights violations. I wrote half the laws you're about to answer to." Caleb stood silently, his father's arm a steadying presence around his shoulders. The precinct felt smaller now, the officer's authority diminished in the face of Daniel Turner's righteous anger. But Caleb's thoughts drifted beyond the room, to the kids who didn't have a father like his, who might still be in a cell, their stories buried under false reports. As Daniel led him toward the exit, promising a hospital visit and a reckoning, Caleb glanced back at Carter and Hayes. Their faces, once smug, now betrayed the dawning realization of their mistake. Outside, under the same streetlights that had witnessed his assault, Caleb felt a spark of resolve. This wasn't just about him, it was about making sure no one else had to bleed under those lights. Atlanta, Georgia, October 16, 2025, 8 a.m. The video of Caleb Turner's assault, captured by a teenage girl's shaky phone camera, exploded across Twitter. Its grainy frames showing his bloodied face under the harsh glare of a Buckhead streetlight. By morning, the hashtag Justice for Caleb was trending nationwide. And in a tense meeting room at Atlanta Police Headquarters, Federal Judge Daniel Turner faced officers James Carter and Michael Hayes, his voice cutting like a blade. "You thought you could beat my son and walk away." But Caleb, his jaw still throbbing from the night before, wasn't content to let this fight be his alone. This was for everyone who'd been silenced, everyone who'd bled without a voice to demand justice. The Turner household was a fortress of controlled chaos by sunrise. Caleb sat on the living room couch, an ice pack pressed against his swollen jaw, the television blaring a local news channel. His face, bruised and blood-streaked, filled the screen. A still from Emma Lawson's video, now looping on every major outlet. Atlanta police officers under scrutiny after assaulting a teenager in Buckhead. The anchor intoned, her voice clipped and urgent. The victim, identified as Caleb Turner, son of federal judge Daniel Turner, was reportedly attacked while returning home from track practice. Caleb winced, not just from the pain, but from the surreal sight of his trauma broadcast to the world his mother. Olivia Turner paced the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear as she coordinated with her. Former colleagues at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. A retired investigative journalist, Olivia had a nose for corruption and a fire for justice that hadn't dimmed since her reporting days. "Yes, I want the full editorial board on this," she said, her tone sharp. "This isn't just about my son, it's about a system that lets cops like these walk free." She glanced at Caleb, her dark eyes softening with maternal concern. But her jaw was set, a mirror of her husband's resolve. Daniel Turner stood by the window, his phone a constant buzz of incoming calls. As a federal judge, he was accustomed to wielding authority, but today, that authority was personal. He'd already spoken to the U.S. Attorney's Office, requesting an independent investigation, and had dispatched his Chief of Staff, Linda Brooks, to secure the officer's body. Cam footage. "The FBI is involved," he told Olivia, hanging up another call. "They're pulling service records for Carter and Hayes. If there's a pattern, we'll find it." His gaze shifted to Caleb, and for a moment, the judge's stoic facade cracked, revealing the anguish of a father. "How's your face, son?" "It hurts," Caleb admitted, his voice muffled by the ice pack. "But I'm okay. Just trying to process all this." He gestured at the TV, where a pundit was now debating whether the officers had acted reasonably under the circumstances. The words stung worse than the bruise. Reasonable? There was nothing reasonable about being punched while handcuffed. About being accused of trespassing in his neighborhood. Caleb's thoughts churned, circling back to Emma's video. Without it, would anyone have believed him? The doorbell rang, and Olivia opened it to find Linda Brooks, her tablet glowing with updates. "The videos hit 5 million views," Linda said, stepping inside. "Protests are forming outside the precinct, mostly students, but community organizers are joining. The mayor's office is panicking." She handed Daniel a folder. Preliminary records on Carter and Hayes. 10 complaints of excessive force. Over 4 years, 8 involving black men or boys, all dismissed internally. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he scanned the documents, his fingers tightening around the edges. "They've been doing this for years," he said, his voice low. "And dangerous. And the department let them." Caleb set the ice pack down, his stomach twisting. 10 complaints? He asked. "How do they still have badges?" Daniel's expression darkened. "That's what we're going to fix. This ends now." Olivia placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "You don't have to be part of this fight, sweetheart. You've been through enough." But Caleb shook his head, a spark of defiance igniting in his chest. "I want to. If I don't speak up, who will? Those other guys in the complaints, they didn't have you or Dad. I do." By noon, Caleb stood outside a small coffee shop near school, waiting for Emma Lawson. He'd messaged her on Instagram to thank her, and she'd suggested meeting to talk. The cafe's patio was quiet, its tables shaded by wide umbrellas. Emma arrived, her curly hair pulled into a high bun, her expression a mix of nervousness and determination. "Hey," she said, sliding into a chair across from him. "You look rough." Caleb touched his jaw, managing a half smile. "Yeah, feels rough too. Thanks for the video, Emma. You didn't have to do that." "I couldn't just stand there," she replied, her voice fierce. "I saw them push you, hit you. It wasn't right." She pulled out her phone, showing him the Twitter thread. The video had been retweeted by activists, politicians, and even a few celebrities. Comments ranged from outrage to skepticism, with some accusing Caleb of provoking the officers. "People are talking," Emma said. "But some of them, they're saying awful things. You sure you're ready for this?" Caleb's gaze drifted to the street, where a news van was parked, its crew eyeing him. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted. "But I can't stay quiet. Not after last night." Emma nodded, her eyes bright with purpose. "My brother went through something like this 2 years ago. Cops stopped him for looking suspicious at a gas station. He was 19, with no record, but they humiliated him. Nobody filmed it, so it was his word against theirs. She leaned forward. "You don't have to do this alone, Caleb. I know people organizers, activists. We can make this bigger." The idea of bigger both thrilled and terrified Caleb. He'd always been the quiet kid, the one who let his running and grades speak for him. But last night had changed something fundamental. He wasn't just Caleb Turner, track star and judge's son. He was a symbol now, whether he wanted to be or not. "Let's do it," he said finally, "whatever it takes." That afternoon, Emma took Caleb to a community center in West End, where she'd organized an impromptu meeting with local activists. The room was packed: teenagers, parents, even a few teachers from North Atlanta High. Caleb stood at the front, his heart pounding as he faced the crowd. "I'm Caleb Turner," he began, his voice unsteady at first. "Last night, I was running home from track practice when 2 cops stopped me. I told them where I lived, who I was. They didn't believe me. They cuffed me, hit me, and took me to the station." He touched his bruised jaw, the pain grounding him. "I'm here because I got lucky. My dad's a judge." But what about everyone else? What about the people who don't have someone to fight for them? The room erupted. In murmurs, some angry, some tearful. A young man named Jamal stood up, his voice shaking. "I was 15 when cops pulled me over for biking in my neighborhood. They said I looked like a suspect. Spent a night in a cell, scared out of my mind." A woman in her 30s shared how her son had been roughed up by police at a bus stop. His injuries dismissed as self-inflicted. Each story chipped away at Caleb's fear, replacing it with a burning resolve. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a pattern, and it had to stop by evening. Daniel had arranged a press conference at the federal courthouse, a gleaming glass building downtown. Caleb stood beside his father, the bruise on his jaw stark under the camera flashes. Reporters packed the room, their questions already forming like a storm on the horizon. Daniel stepped to the podium, his presence commanding silence. "Last night, my son Caleb was assaulted by officers James Carter and Michael Hayes of the Atlanta Police Department," he began, his voice steady but laced with fury. He was handcuffed, compliant, and posing no threat. The attack was captured on both a bystander's video and the officer's body cams. This is not just a personal injustice, it's a symptom of systemic failure. Caleb's throat tightened as his father gestured to him. "My son has chosen to speak for himself." Taking a deep breath, Caleb stepped forward, the weight of every eye in the room pressing against him. "I'm Caleb Turner," he said, his voice clearer than he'd expected. "I was running home from practice when those officers stopped me. I told them I lived in Buckhead, gave them my address. They didn't believe me because of how I look. They hit me while I was cuffed, threw me to the ground, and lied about it in their reports." He paused, meeting the gaze of a reporter in the front row. "I'm standing here because my dad has power. But this happens every day to people who don't have that. They deserve justice, too." The room exploded with questions, cameras clicking like gunfire. "Caleb, do you think this was racially motivated?" One reporter shouted. "What are you demanding from the police?" Another called. Daniel raised a hand, silencing the chaos. "We're demanding accountability," he said. "Officers Carter and Hayes have been suspended without pay, and criminal charges will be filed by tomorrow. My office is launching a full investigation into the Atlanta Police Department's policies and complaint procedures." This ends here. As they left the courthouse, Caleb felt the weight of his words settling into his bones. The video, the press conference, the stories at the community center, they were building something unstoppable. But the attention came with a cost. His phone buzzed with notifications, supportive messages mixed with hateful comments calling him a liar. A troublemaker, even worse. Olivia hugged him tightly when they got home, her voice fierce. You were incredible today. But this is going to get harder before it gets easier. Are you sure you're ready? Caleb nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. I have to be. For Jamal, for Emma's brother, for everyone who spoke today. Daniel joined them, his expression a mix of pride and concern. You've started something. Son, something bigger than us. But you don't have to carry it alone. He handed Caleb a business card. Okay, this is Marcus Reed, one of the best civil rights attorneys in the state. He's meeting us tomorrow to plan next steps. That night, Caleb lay in bed, the glow of his phone illuminating his room. He scrolled through Twitter, the hashtag Justice for Caleb, hashtag Now Paired with Others, hashtag End Police Brutality, hashtag Black Lives Matter. Emma's latest tweet linked to a petition for mandatory body cams and civilian oversight boards already nearing 50,000 signatures. A message from her popped up. You did great today. Let's keep pushing. Community meeting tomorrow night. Caleb typed back, I'm in. As he sat, his phone down, the pain in his jaw pulsed faintly, a reminder of the night that had changed everything. But it wasn't just pain anymore, it was purpose. He thought of the faces at the community center, the stories that had poured out like a dam breaking. This wasn't just about him or his family. It was about a city, a system, a country that needed to reckon with its failures. Caleb closed his eyes, the distant hum of Atlanta's streets filtering through his window. Tomorrow, he'd step back into the fight, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd been left voiceless under the streetlights. Atlanta, Georgia, November 30th, 2025. 3 p.m. Caleb Turner stood on the sunlit track at North Atlanta High, his sneakers gripping the rubberized surface, heart pounding in rhythm with the crowd's cheers. The bruises on his jaw had faded, but the fire in his eyes burned brighter than ever. Across town, a public hearing on police reform was being broadcast live, and Caleb, now a reluctant symbol of justice, was set to testify. This wasn't just his fight anymore, it was for every kid who'd felt the cold bite of handcuffs. Every voice drowned out by a system that too often protected the wrong people. As he prepared for the final race of the season, Caleb knew the real finish line wasn't on the track, but in the halls of power, where he'd demand a world where no one had to fear the streetlights. The crisp November air carried the scent of freshly cut grass as Caleb stretched on the sidelines, his track uniform snug against his lean frame. The stands were packed with students, parents, and local reporters, their eyes drawn to the boy whose face had dominated headlines for weeks. Since the press conference, Caleb had become a reluctant celebrity, his story fueling protests and policy. Debates across Atlanta. The hashtag Justice for Caleb hashtag had evolved into a broader movement, with petitions for body cams and civilian oversight boards gaining traction nationwide. But fame came with a shadow hate mail, online threats, and whispers from some classmates who called him a snitch or worse. Caleb pushed the noise aside, focusing on the race ahead. Running had always been his escape, a space where the world's weight couldn't touch him. Coach Hargrove clapped him on the shoulder, his weathered face creased with pride. You're ready, Turner. Break that school record today and show what you're made of. Caleb nodded, his gaze fixed on the track. He wasn't just running for himself or the team. He was running for the kid he'd been 6 weeks ago, the one who'd thought compliance would keep him safe. That kid was gone, replaced by someone who understood that safety wasn't guaranteed, not for him or anyone who looked like him. The starter's pistol cracked, and Caleb surged forward, his legs a blur as the crowd roared. Across town, in the Grand Chamber of Atlanta's City Hall, the public hearing on police reform was underway. Daniel Turner sat in the front row, his navy suit impeccable, his expression a fortress of calm determination. Beside him, Olivia adjusted, her glasses scribbling notes for a potential op-ed she'd pitched to her old editor. The room buzzed with tension activists and #Justice for Caleb shirts, city officials in starched collars, and a handful of police union reps glaring from the back. The hearing, prompted by Caleb's case and the viral video, was a rare chance to force accountability on a department long shielded by its bureaucracy. Caleb's testimony was scheduled for the afternoon, and the anticipation weighed on him even as he rounded the first curve of the track. He'd spent the past week preparing with Marcus Reed, the civil rights attorney Daniel had brought on board. Marcus, a wiry man with a quick smile and a mind like a steel trap, had walked Caleb through what to expect: tough questions, attempts to discredit him, and the pressure of speaking for more than just himself. "You're not just telling your story," Marcus had said, his voice steady. "You're speaking for every kid who didn't make it out of that patrol car with a voice." On the track, Caleb hit his stride, his breaths syncing with his footfalls. The other runners faded behind him, their gasps distant echoes. He thought of the community meeting he and Emma had organized weeks ago, where dozens of Atlantans had shared stories of police harassment stories that mirrored his own but lacked the privilege of a federal judge's intervention. Jamal's trembling voice, recounting a night in a cell at 15, a mother's tears as she described her son's broken arm, dismissed as clumsiness by officers. Those stories had lit a fire in Caleb, one that burned hotter than fear or doubt. As he crossed the halfway mark, a memory flashed: Emma's text last night, linking to a new development. A young officer named Sarah Nguyen had come forward, risking her career to expose internal cover-ups within the Atlanta PD. Sarah, a rookie with barely a year on the force, had overheard supervisors discussing how to handle Caleb's case, falsifying reports, pressuring witnesses to stay silent. Her conscience wouldn't let her stay quiet. "I saw your video," she'd told Caleb in a private meeting, her hands twisting nervously. "I've seen what Carter and Hayes did before, 2 others. Someone has to stop it." Her testimony, set to follow Caleb's, could be the key to dismantling the department's wall of silence. The crowd's cheers pulled Caleb back to the race. He leaned into the final lap, his legs burning but unstoppable. The school record 52.4 seconds for the 400-meter was within reach. He pictured his father in the stands, Daniel's rare smile breaking through his usual stoicism. Olivia would be there too, her camera ready to capture the moment. But more than their pride, Caleb ran for the kids at the community center, for Sarah Nguyen's courage, for Emma's unwavering support. He crossed the finish line in a blur, the clock stopping at 52.1 seconds, new record. The stands erupted, and Caleb bent over, hands on his knees, gasping but triumphant. An hour later, showered and dressed in a borrowed suit from his father, Caleb entered City Hall. The chamber was a sea of faces, some supportive, others skeptical. Emma sat near the front, her phone out, live tweeting the hearing for her growing following. She gave Caleb a quick nod, her eyes fierce with encouragement. Daniel squeezed his shoulder as they took their seats, his voice low. "You've got this, son. Tell the truth, and don't let them rattle you." Olivia leaned in, her hand warm on his. "We're right here, Caleb. Always." The hearing began with opening statements from council members, their words a mix of cautious reform promises and defensive posturing. The police union's representative, a gruff man named Tom Delaney, argued that officers Carter and Hayes had followed protocol, that Caleb's non-compliance justified their actions. The claim drew boos from the audience, quickly silenced by the gavel. Caleb's stomach churned, but he kept his expression neutral. His father's training kicking in, show them strength, not anger. When his name was called, Caleb approached the podium, the weight of every eye pressing against him. Microphones bristled before him, and cameras broadcast his face to thousands watching live. He adjusted the mic, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "My name is Caleb Turner." On October 15th, I was running home from track practice in Buckhead when officers James Carter and Michael Hayes stopped me. I told them my address, 245 Peachtree Road, and that I lived there. They didn't believe me. They handcuffed me, searched my bag without consent, and when I mentioned my father's name, they hit me. He touched his jaw, the memory of pain. Sharpening his words, I was compliant. I wasn't a threat. They attacked me because of how I look, not what I did. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of cameras. Caleb continued, his voice gaining strength. "I'm here because I got lucky. My dad is a federal judge. He got me out, got the truth out. But I've met others who weren't lucky. Kids. Like Jamal, who spent a night in a cell for biking home. Mothers whose sons were hurt, their complaints ignored. This isn't about me. It's about a system that lets officers like Carter and Hayes hurt people and walk away. We need body cams. On every officer, civilian oversight boards, and training that teaches respect, not suspicion." A councilwoman, Regina Holt, leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Mr. Turner, you claim the officers acted out of racial bias. Do you have evidence beyond your account?" Caleb met her gaze, unflinching. "There's the video a bystander took, showing them hitting me while I was cuffed. There's their body cam footage, which the FBI has now. And there are 10 prior complaints against them, mostly against black men and boys, all dismissed. That's not a coincidence, it's a pattern." The room murmured, and Holt's expression softened slightly. Another council member, a man with a skeptical frown, pressed further. "You're a minor, Mr. Turner. Why should we take your word over trained officers?" Before Caleb could respond, Emma stood in the audience, her voice cutting through. "Because he's telling the truth. The video doesn't lie, and neither do the other victims who've come forward." The gavel banged, but the crowd's applause drowned it out. Sarah Nugent's testimony followed, and her words hit like a thunderclap. A petite woman with a steady gaze, she stood at the podium, her uniform replaced by civilian clothes to signal her defiance. "I've been an officer for 14 months, she began, her voice clear. "In that time, I've seen complaints against Carter and Hayes buried. I've heard supervisors tell rookies to look the other way when excessive force is reported. After Caleb's arrest, I overheard a lieutenant suggest altering the body cam logs to make it look like he resisted. I couldn't stay silent anymore." The room erupted, some in shock, others in anger. The police union reps shifted uncomfortably, their whispers frantic. Sarah's testimony sealed the officer's fate. By the next morning, Carter and Hayes were formally charged with assault, false arrest, and falsifying reports. The U.S. Attorney's Office, under pressure from Daniels' connections, added civil rights violations to the list. The Atlanta PD, led by Interim Chief Maria Lopez, announced immediate reforms, mandatory body cams for all officers, a civilian oversight board with real authority, and a review of all prior complaints against active officers. Lopez, a no-nonsense reformer, met privately with Caleb and his family, her eyes weary but resolute. "This department has failed too many people," she said. "We're going to fix it, starting now." Back at school, Caleb became a quiet hero. Classmates who'd once whispered about him now clapped him on the back, and his track teammates wore #JusticeForCaleb wristbands during practice. But the attention wasn't all positive. A local blog accused him of exaggerating his injuries, and a few anonymous letters arrived at the Turner home, their words laced with racial slurs. Olivia intercepted them before Caleb could see, but he sensed her worry. "I'm okay, Mom," he told her one evening, catching her staring at the mailbox. "They can't scare me out of this." Emma became his anchor, her energy infectious. Together, they launched a series of workshops at the community center, teaching teens their rights during police encounters. Hands visible. Stay calm. No. Your rights, Caleb told a group of middle schoolers, echoing his father's lessons. Quit. And if you see something wrong, record it. Quit. Your phone is your power. The workshops drew crowds, and local churches began hosting their own, spreading the movement beyond Atlanta. On the night of the state championships, Caleb stood on the track again, the stadium lights casting long shadows. His family was in the stands. Daniel, Olivia, and even Linda Brooks, who'd become a fierce advocate for the cause. Emma was there too, her phone ready to capture the race, though she promised not to tweet it unless he won. Caleb grinned at her, the first real smile he'd felt in weeks. The starter's pistol fired, and he took off, his body a machine of muscle and will. The crowd faded, the world narrowing to the track, the rhythm of his breath, the burn in his legs. He crossed the finish line first, clocking 51.8 seconds, personal best. The stands exploded, and Daniel was on his feet, his rare grin splitting his face. Olivia rushed down, her camera forgotten as she pulled Caleb into a hug. "You're unstoppable," she whispered, her voice thick with pride. Daniel joined them, his hand heavy on Caleb's shoulder. "You did more than win a race today, son. You're changing things." Caleb nodded, his chest tight with emotion. He thought of Sarah Nguyen, risking her badge for the truth. Crucial, who'd texted him after the hearing saying, "You gave me hope." The kids at the workshops, there, eyes wide with determination. The story closed that evening as Caleb jogged through Buckhead, the same streets where it all began. The streetlights glowed softly, no longer a threat, but a reminder of how far he'd come. No patrol cars trailed him now, and the weight of fear had lifted, replaced by purpose. He wasn't naive. The system was still broken, and change was slow. But every step he took, every workshop he led, every story he amplified brought the world closer to one where no one had to fear the lights. Caleb ran faster, his strides long and free, carrying the voices of the voiceless into the night.